Have you ever wondered why a small piece of metal can buy you food, shelter, or even armies? What you're holding in your pocket right now is the result of one of humanity's most brilliant deceptions. And it all started with a single kingdom's desperate need to solve an impossible problem. Picture this. It's 600 BC, and you're standing on the shores of ancient Lydia, in what we now call Turkey. The world operates on debt and memory. Temples keep ledgers, scribes track who owes what to whom, and every transaction requires someone to vouch for your character. But King Croesus has a problem that's about to change civilization forever. His armies are growing restless. His trade routes are expanding beyond the reach of temple records. And most critically, he needs a way to move value across vast distances without relying on the honesty of distant priests and the accuracy of their clay tablets. The solution his kingdom invented was so revolutionary that we're still living with its consequences today. They created the world's first coin, and with it, they fundamentally rewired how humans think about value, trust, and power. This wasn't just a technological advancement. It was the moment we began to confuse the container for the contents, setting up a cycle of illusion that continues to shape our world. Let me take you inside the mind of a Lydian banker standing in the royal mint. Before coins, every silver transaction was a nightmare of verification. You had to weigh the metal, test its purity, argue about its quality, and hope the person across from you wasn't trying to pass off lead mixed with silver dust. Commerce moved at the speed of suspicion. The banker's genius was recognizing that trust could be manufactured and packaged. They took electrum, that naturally occurring mixture of gold and silver found in their local rivers, and did something unprecedented. They standardized the weight, certified the purity, and stamped each piece with the royal seal of a roaring lion. That stamp was more than decoration. It was a promise, a warranty, a revolutionary leap of faith. The banker was essentially saying to every merchant, every soldier, every citizen, stop questioning, stop testing, stop weighing. Trust the seal. This small piece of metal carries the full authority of the kingdom behind it. Suddenly, transactions that once took hours could happen in seconds. For the first time in human history, value could move faster than information. Liquidity was born, and with it, the foundations of modern capitalism. But why did King Croesus embrace this system so enthusiastically? Because coins solved his most pressing political problem: how to project power beyond the physical reach of his palace. Think about the logistics of ancient warfare. You can't march an army 500 miles and expect to feed them with promises written on tablets back home. You can't pay mercenaries with temple grain that exists only in theoretical ledgers. You need something portable, universally recognized, and immediately valuable. Coins allowed Croesus to create the world's first professional military. He could mint payment for his soldiers, send them anywhere in the known world, and trust that they could buy supplies from strangers who had never heard of Lydia. But here's where the true genius of royal coinage reveals itself. The king didn't just issue coins as payment. He demanded them back as taxes. This created a closed loop of dependency that every government since has copied. The ruler mints the coin, pays his army, the army spends it in the marketplace, and the marketplace owner must give it back to the ruler as tribute. The coin becomes a tool of control disguised as a tool of freedom. The population is forced to participate in the king's economy simply to get their hands on the only currency the king will accept for taxes. It's a system so elegant and effective that every empire since has adopted some version of it. Now let's examine this revolution from the perspective of ordinary citizens. For the common person, coins felt like liberation. No longer did you need to rely on local lords to remember your social standing or trust distant scribes to maintain accurate records of your wealth. You could walk into any marketplace, in any city, with your fortune literally in your pocket. The metal didn't care about your family name, your regional accent, or your religious beliefs. It spoke a universal language that transcended cultural barriers. This portability was intoxicating. For the first time, your economic destiny wasn't tied to your birthplace or your social connections. Wealth had become anonymous and mobile. The merchant class exploded across the ancient world as trade routes opened up between strangers who shared no common language except the clink of authenticated metal. But something dangerous was happening beneath this apparent freedom. People began to forget what money actually represented. The physical coin became mesmerizing in a way that abstract debt records never could. Citizens started to believe that the value lived inside the metal itself, rather than recognizing the coin as merely a receipt for human labor and resources. This confusion between symbol and substance would plague civilizations for millennia. When people think wealth exists in objects rather than relationships, greed takes on entirely new dimensions. The pursuit of coins became separate from the pursuit of productive activity. Geography played a crucial role in this monetary revolution. Lydia wasn't chosen by accident as the birthplace of coinage. The kingdom sat astride the Pactolus River, legendary for its gold deposits. Ancient writers claimed you could pan gold directly from its waters. Having access to precious metals was like having access to the raw materials of trust itself. Because they controlled the hardware, Lydians could build the software of currency. Once neighboring kingdoms saw the military and economic advantages of Lydian coinage, the technology spread like wildfire across the Mediterranean. Greek city-states adopted the innovation and refined it. Persian empires scaled it up. Roman legions carried it to the edges of the known world. Each culture added its own symbols and refinements, but the core concept remained unchanged. Physical tokens bearing governmental authority could substitute for complex webs of social obligation. Here's where we need to conduct our audit of this ancient innovation, because the invention of coins contained the seeds of every monetary crisis that followed. The moment societies moved from social memory to physical tokens, they opened the door to systematic fraud. If the value supposedly lives in the coin, what happens when authorities reduce the amount of precious metal while keeping the same official stamp? What happens when kings clip the edges of coins to gather extra metal for new minting? What happens when the gap between the face value and the metal content becomes impossible to ignore? These weren't theoretical problems. They became the recurring nightmares of every civilization that adopted coinage. Rulers discovered they could finance wars and projects by gradually reducing the precious metal content of their currency while maintaining the fiction that each coin held its original value. Citizens slowly realized they were participating in an elaborate shell game. The stamp that was supposed to guarantee authenticity became a tool for deception. Trust, which coins were designed to make portable, became the very thing that coins systematically destroyed. Look at the money in your wallet today. Those paper bills and plastic cards represent the direct descendants of Lydian coins. The metal is gone, but the essential promise remains the same. This token carries the full faith and credit of the issuing authority. We've simply moved from trusting kings to trusting central banks, from relying on the purity of precious metals to relying on the stability of governmental institutions. The fundamental act of faith remains unchanged across 26 centuries. The Lydian invention taught us that money is ultimately about managing trust at scale. Coins allowed strangers to transact without personal relationships, governments to project power across vast distances, and individuals to accumulate wealth independent of social connections. But it also taught us that physical tokens inevitably become confused with actual value, that standardization enables manipulation, and that the authority behind the stamp determines the worth of the currency. Every financial crisis since has been a variation on themes first established in ancient Lydia. Every modern debate about monetary policy echoes arguments that began when the first citizen questioned whether the lion's head stamp truly guaranteed the metal's purity. Understanding this history isn't academic curiosity. It's essential preparation for navigating our current monetary system. The same psychological tricks that made Lydian coins effective are still being used to shape your economic behavior today. Next week, we're traveling to Rome to examine what happens when an empire tries to fuel its entire existence on what historians call a silver lung. We'll explore how the Romans took the Lydian innovation and scaled it into the world's first global currency. And we'll discover why that ambition ultimately contributed to the empire's collapse. The story of money is really the story of power. And the story of power is ultimately about understanding the difference between reality and the symbols we use to represent it. The Lydians gave us both the tools of modern prosperity and the seeds of modern financial instability. The question isn't whether their invention was good or bad. The question is whether we're smart enough to recognize when we're being played by the same ancient game, just with newer pieces on the board.